There was a time when honesty in marriage meant something more than just not telling lies. It meant having the courage to speak uncomfortable truths that might change everything. What happened on Family Feud in September 2024 would prove that sometimes the most important conversations happen in the most unexpected places. When Steve Harvey asked 43-year-old Rachel Morrison a simple question about marriage, her husband Tom stood smiling beside her, confident he knew exactly what she would say. But Rachel's answer would shock him, stun the audience, and remind millions of viewers why communication is the foundation of every strong relationship. Before we continue with this powerful story, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us what truly matters in life. The Family Feud studio buzzed with anticipation that Friday afternoon. The Morrison family from Austin, Texas stood ready to compete, their matching blue shirts creating a unified appearance that suggested a close-knit group. Tom Morrison, 45 years old and radiating confidence, stood at the center of his family. His salt and pepper hair was styled perfectly, his smile broad and genuine. He had the bearing of a man who believed he had built a good life and knew his family well. Next to him stood his wife Rachel, 43 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore minimal makeup and carried herself with a quiet dignity that contrasted with her husband's more outgoing energy. While Tom waved enthusiastically to the audience and exchanged jokes with Steve Harvey during the family introductions, Rachel smiled politely but remained somewhat reserved. Those who looked closely might have noticed a certain tension in her shoulders, a thoughtfulness in her expression that suggested someone carrying unspoken words. Their two teenage children completed the family lineup. Emma, 17, was preparing for college applications. Lucas, 15, played varsity soccer and dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. Both spoke warmly about their parents during the pre-show interviews, describing a stable home life filled with family dinners, weekend activities, and consistent support. Tom and Rachel Morrison had been married for 19 years. They had met in their early 20s, both working entry-level positions at the same marketing firm in Dallas. Tom had been immediately attracted to Rachel's intelligence and quiet confidence. Rachel had appreciated Tom's ambition and social ease. They dated for 2 years before marrying in a ceremony attended by 200 friends and family members. Their marriage followed what many would consider a traditional and successful trajectory. Tom climbed the corporate ladder steadily, moving from marketing associate to director to vice president over the course of 15 years. His career required long hours, frequent travel, and constant availability for client emergencies. But the payoff was substantial. His income allowed them to buy a 4-bedroom house in a desirable Austin neighborhood, take annual vacations, and provide their children with private music lessons, sports equipment, and college savings accounts. Rachel had also started in marketing, showing considerable talent for strategic planning and creative campaigns. Her supervisors praised her innovative thinking and ability to understand consumer psychology. She received promotions in her first 3 years and seemed headed for a successful career of her own. Then Emma was born. Rachel took the standard 3-month maternity leave, returning to work with a mix of relief at engaging her professional skills again and guilt at leaving her infant daughter in daycare. The balancing act of career and motherhood proved more challenging than she had anticipated. Late nights at the office meant missing bedtime routines. Business trips conflicted with pediatrician appointments. The constant mental juggling of conference calls and childhood milestones created a stress that seemed to have no relief valve. When Lucas was born 2 years later, Tom and Rachel had a conversation about their family's future. Tom's career was accelerating rapidly. He had just been promoted to senior director with a significant salary increase. Rachel's career was progressing well but demanded equally long hours and frequent travel. Someone needed to be more available for the children. The decision, though framed as mutual, had a certain inevitability to it. Rachel stepped back from her career. She did not quit entirely, but she moved to a part-time consulting position that offered flexibility but limited advancement potential. She told herself it was temporary, just until the children were older and less dependent. She told Tom the same thing. He supported the decision, expressing gratitude for her willingness to prioritize the family's needs. The years unfolded in a pattern that became increasingly established. Tom's career continued its upward trajectory. He became vice president of the entire Southwest region, managing a team of over 100 people. His success brought financial security and social status. People in their community knew Tom Morrison as a successful business leader, a member of the country club, a man who had built something impressive. Rachel's part-time consulting work continued, but the opportunities for growth were limited by her constrained schedule. She was available for the children's school events, managed the household logistics, coordinated family schedules, and ensured that life ran smoothly. She was good at it. Exceptionally good. The house was always organized, meals were prepared with thought and care, the children's needs were anticipated and met. But something had shifted in Rachel over the years. The part-time consulting work that was supposed to be temporary had lasted 15 years. The career she had stepped back from had continued without her, with younger colleagues now occupying the senior positions she might have held. The creative strategic thinking she had once applied to marketing campaigns was now directed toward coordinating carpool schedules and planning efficient grocery shopping routes. Tom occasionally asked if she was happy. Rachel always said yes. She pointed to their beautiful home, their healthy children, their stable life. And those things were real. She did love her family. She was proud of her children. She appreciated the financial security Tom's career provided. But happiness and contentment are not always the same thing, and Rachel had learned to confuse the two. What Rachel had never told Tom, what she had barely acknowledged to herself, was that she resented the assumption that her career was the logical one to sacrifice. She resented that her intelligence and talents were now primarily directed toward domestic logistics rather than professional challenges. She resented that Tom's success was celebrated and discussed while her contributions were simply expected and taken for granted. She resented that when people asked, "What do you do?" at social gatherings, she had to say, "Part-time consulting," and watch their interest visibly decrease, while Tom's answer of VP of Southwest Region sparked engaged conversations and requests for business cards. She resented that her worth seemed measured by how well she supported others rather than what she achieved herself. But most of all, Rachel resented that she had never said any of this out loud. She had swallowed the resentment, buried it beneath busy schedules and family responsibilities, and presented a pleasant face to the world. Tom genuinely believed their arrangement worked well for everyone. How could he know otherwise when Rachel had never told him the truth? The opportunity to appear on Family Feud had come through a friend who worked in television production. The friend thought the Morrisons would be perfect for the show. They were an attractive family, articulate, and seemed to have good chemistry. Tom had been immediately enthusiastic. Rachel had agreed, though with less excitement. It was just a game show, she told herself. A fun family experience, nothing more. She had not anticipated that Steve Harvey might ask questions that would crack open the careful silence she had maintained for 15 years. She had not anticipated that standing on a national television stage with her husband beside her might create a moment where truth demanded to be spoken. And she certainly had not anticipated that she would find the courage to speak it. The game had progressed normally through the first few rounds. The Morrison family was performing well, their answers solid and their teamwork apparent. Tom was in his element, displaying the same confident charisma that served him well in business presentations. He high-fived his children after correct answers, laughed at Steve's jokes, and seemed to be genuinely enjoying the experience. Rachel participated quietly but competently. She answered her questions correctly, supported her family members, and smiled at appropriate moments. But those watching closely might have noticed that her smiles never quite reached her eyes, that her enthusiasm seemed performed rather than felt. Between rounds, Steve Harvey did what he often did. He engaged with the families, asking questions, building rapport, learning their stories. He turned to Tom and Rachel, noting that they seemed like a strong couple. 19 years of marriage, Steve said. That is impressive. What is the secret to making it work that long? Tom did not hesitate. He put his arm around Rachel and launched into an answer that came easily to him. communication and teamwork. Steve, Rachel and I make a great team. I focus on my career and bring home the paycheck. Rachel manages everything at home and makes sure our family runs smoothly. We each play to our strengths, you know. It works perfectly. Steve nodded, then turned to Rachel. And what would you say, Rachel? What makes your marriage work? Rachel opened her mouth to give the expected answer, to echo what Tom had said about teamwork and playing to strengths, to maintain the narrative that they had both been telling for 15 years. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was the weight of 15 years of unspoken truth. Perhaps it was the absurdity of standing on national television pretending everything was perfectly balanced when it was not. Perhaps it was simply that she was tired of performing contentment she did not feel. Whatever the reason, when Rachel spoke, the words that came out were not the ones anyone expected. Compromise, she said, and there was an edge to her voice that had not been there before. Though I think there might be a better word for it. Accommodation, maybe. Steve's eyebrows raised slightly. He had interviewed enough couples to recognize when something real was breaking through the rehearsed responses. Accommodation? He asked. Tell me what you mean by that. Tom's smile had faltered slightly. He looked at Rachel with confusion, clearly uncertain where this was going. Rachel took a breath. The studio had grown quieter, the audience sensing something significant happening. I mean that I have accommodated what our marriage needed. I stepped back from my career so Tom could pursue his. I rearranged my professional goals so our family could function smoothly. I accommodated the assumption that my work was less important, my ambitions less valuable, my contributions less worthy of discussion or celebration. The words hung in the air. Tom's face had gone pale. His arm, which had been around Rachel's shoulders, dropped to his side. Rachel, what are you talking about? Tom's voice carried genuine bewilderment. You chose to go part-time. You said it was what you wanted. No, Tom. Rachel's voice remained steady, but there was an intensity to it now. I said it was what the family needed. Those are not the same thing. And you never asked if it was what I wanted. You just accepted it because it made your life easier. Steve Harvey stood motionless, recognizing that he was witnessing something profound. The production crew made no move to interrupt. This was television gold, but more than that, it was real human emotion breaking through in a way that could not be scripted. Emma and Lucas stood to the side, their faces showing shock. They had never heard their mother speak this way to their father. The carefully maintained family harmony they had grown up with was fracturing in real time. I do not understand, Tom said, and the genuine confusion in his voice was evident. You have never said anything about being unhappy with our arrangement. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I have been silent for 15 years, Tom, and I am tired of being silent. I am tired of pretending that our arrangement is equitable when it is not. I am tired of your success being celebrated while my contributions are invisible. I am tired of you describing us as a team when what you actually mean is that I support your goals while mine do not matter. Tom's face showed a mixture of shock, hurt, and rising defensiveness. That is not fair, Rachel. Everything I have done has been for this family. I work 60 hours a week so we can have the life we have. And I work 60 hours a week managing everything you do not have to think about. Rachel responded, her voice growing stronger. But my 60 hours do not come with a paycheck or a title or recognition. They come with the expectation that I should be grateful for the opportunity to support your career. As Steve finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. Rachel, I need to ask you something. If you could answer one question honestly, what would you want Tom to understand? Rachel turned away from Tom to face Steve and the cameras. When she spoke, her words were directed not just to her husband but to everyone watching. I would want him to understand that when I said yes to going part-time 15 years ago, I was not saying yes to permanently sacrificing my career ambitions. I was saying yes to a temporary adjustment that somehow became permanent without either of us noticing or caring. I would want him to understand that just because I did not complain does not mean I was happy. And I would want him to understand that a partnership requires both people's dreams to matter, not just the one whose work brings in more money. The studio was completely silent. Even Steve Harvey, known for always having something to say, seemed at a loss for words. Tom's defensive posture had shifted. His shoulders had slumped slightly, and his face showed the first signs of genuine comprehension that something serious was happening in his marriage. "Why did you never tell me any of this?" he asked quietly. "Because you never asked," Rachel said simply. "You asked if I was happy, but you never asked if I was fulfilled. You never asked if I missed my career. You never asked what I wanted for my own future beyond supporting yours and raising our children." Steve turned to Tom. "How are you feeling right now?" Tom struggled to find words. "I feel like I just discovered that I have been married to someone I do not actually know. Like the last 19 years have been based on assumptions I never questioned." "Were they wrong assumptions?" Steve asked. Tom looked at Rachel, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. "I think they must have been, because the woman standing next to me right now is not the woman I thought I knew." Emma stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, why did you never say anything to us?" Rachel turned to her daughter. "Because I wanted you to see a stable, happy home. Because I wanted to protect you from adult problems. And because I convinced myself that my feelings did not matter as much as everyone else's comfort." She paused, looking at both her children. "But I realize now that I did you a disservice by modeling silence. I taught you that women should swallow their ambitions and pretend to be content. And that is not the lesson I want you to carry forward." Lucas spoke up, his voice shaking. "Does this mean you and Dad are getting divorced?" The question hung in the air. Every person in the studio seemed to hold their breath waiting for the answer. Rachel's response was immediate and firm. "No. This means your father and I need to have conversations we should have had 15 years ago. This means we need to build an actual partnership instead of the one-sided arrangement we have been calling a partnership." She turned back to Tom. "I do not want to end our marriage, Tom, but I cannot continue it the way it has been. Something has to change." Harvey stepped closer to both of them. "Tom, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer. Can you hear what Rachel is saying? Can you understand that she is not attacking you but asking to be seen?" Tom was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I have been completely blind, have I not? I thought I was being a good husband by providing financially and being faithful and showing up for family events. But I never thought about whether Rachel was actually fulfilled or just performing fulfillment." He turned to face Rachel directly. "You are right. I never asked about your dreams because I was too focused on mine. I never noticed your sacrifice because it made my life so much easier. I assumed that because you were good at managing our home and raising our children, that was what you wanted to be doing. I never considered that you might be good at it and still want something more." Rachel's expression softened slightly, but she did not let him off easily. "Those are true observations, Tom. But the question is, what are you willing to do differently?" Tom did not hesitate this time. "Whatever needs to change. I do not want to lose you, Rachel, and I do not want to continue a marriage where you are invisible. Tell me what you need." Steve interjected. "Rachel, what do you need from Tom? What would actual partnership look like?" Rachel had clearly been thinking about this question for a long time, even if she had never voiced it before. "I need my career ambitions to matter as much as Tom's do. I need us to make decisions about our lives based on both our goals, not just his. I need my contributions to be valued and discussed, not just expected and overlooked. And I need to be asked what I want instead of having it assumed that I want whatever is most convenient for everyone else." She continued, her voice growing more certain. "I want to go back to full-time work in marketing strategy. I want to pursue the career I set aside. I am only 43 years old. I have potentially 25 more years of working life ahead of me. I do not want to spend all of them in a supporting role." Tom's face showed multiple emotions passing across it. Shock, certainly, but also something that looked like relief mixed with fear. "That would change everything about how our family operates," he said. "Yes, it would," Rachel agreed. "It would mean you could not work 60 hours a week anymore. It would mean sharing household responsibilities equally. It would mean our children learning to be more independent. It would mean sacrificing some of the things your career has provided in order to make room for mine." She looked at him directly. "The question is whether you are willing to make those changes. Because I have been accommodating for 15 years, it is time for you to accommodate too." The audience, which had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly erupted in applause. Steve let it continue for a moment before raising his hand for quiet. "Tom, I have seen a lot of marriages in my years on television, and I can tell you that what just happened here is rare. Your wife just gave you the truth. Not to hurt you, but to save your marriage. The question is, are you going to hear it?" Tom looked at Rachel, then at his children, then back at Rachel. When he spoke, tears were visible in his eyes. "I hear it. And I am ashamed that it took this long and took a game show for me to finally listen. Rachel, I cannot give you back 15 years. But I can commit to the next 15 being different. I can commit to your career mattering as much as mine. I can commit to actually sharing our life equally instead of you supporting mine." He paused, then added, "I am going to need help figuring out how to do that. I have been operating under certain assumptions for so long that I do not know how to be a different kind of husband. But I am willing to learn." Steve turned to the audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed goes beyond Family Feud. We witnessed the power of speaking truth in relationships." Rachel Morrison could have continued playing her role, smiling and saying everything was fine. But instead, she chose honesty, and her husband chose to listen. He looked back at the family. "Now, we still have a game to finish. But I think we all know that the real stakes here have nothing to do with prize money." The opposing family, the Rodriguez family from New Mexico, had been standing quietly on the other side of the stage. The mother, Elena Rodriguez, spoke up. "We came here to compete, but what we just witnessed is more important than any game. Rachel, thank you for your honesty. You just gave permission to every woman watching to speak their own truth." The two families approached each other, and what followed was an embrace between two groups of strangers united by witnessing something profound together. When they resumed the game, there was a different energy in the studio. The Morrison family won, but the victory felt almost incidental to what had already occurred. As Steve handed Tom the money board showing their winnings, he made one final observation. "Tom, you won $20,000 today, but you stand to lose something far more valuable if you do not follow through on what you just promised your wife. Money is replaceable. Trust and partnership are not." Tom nodded solemnly. "I understand that, Steve. This game show appearance just became the most expensive wake-up call of my life, and I am grateful for it." A 65th TT League ACY 16-20 minutes, the episode aired 3 weeks later. Within hours, Rachel's words had been clipped, shared, and discussed across every social media platform. The segment where she confronted Tom about their unequal partnership was viewed over 60 million times in the first 48 hours. But the response was not universally positive. The reactions revealed the deep divisions in how people viewed marriage, partnership, and women's roles. Some praised Rachel's courage and honesty. They shared their own stories of careers sacrificed, ambitions postponed, and resentment swallowed for the sake of family harmony. The hashtag that emerged was notable in its specificity and pain qui I was not ask. Thousands of women shared stories of decisions made about their lives without anyone asking what they actually wanted. They described stepping back from careers, relocating for husbands' jobs, and managing households while their own professional aspirations were treated as optional or secondary. The common thread in all these stories was not anger at their families, but grief at their own silence and the assumptions that had never been questioned. But others criticized Rachel harshly. They accused her of being ungrateful, selfish, and publicly humiliating her husband. They argued that she had made her choices freely and had no right to complain about consequences she had accepted. They suggested that her behavior on Family Feud was attention-seeking and damaging to her children. The debate raged across media platforms, revealing fundamental disagreements about what partnership meant and whose dreams should take priority in a family. Tom and Rachel, meanwhile, were navigating the aftermath in private. The morning after the episode aired, Tom sat down with Rachel at their kitchen table and made a proposal. "I have been thinking about what you said. about wanting to return to full-time marketing work, about needing your career to matter as much as mine, and I have made a decision. Rachel waited, uncertain what was coming. I am going to step back from my VP position and move to a senior director role with more manageable hours. It is a demotion in title and a pay cut, but it will free up time for me to share household responsibilities equally, and it will make space for you to pursue your career fully. Rachel stared at him in shock. Tom, you do not have to do that. I am not asking you to sacrifice your career the way I did mine. I know you are not asking, Tom said quietly. But I am offering, because I finally understand that partnership means both people's careers and dreams matter equally, and for 15 years only mine have mattered. It is my turn to accommodate. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. They discussed logistics, finances, and fears. They talked about how to explain the changes to their children. They acknowledged that rebuilding their marriage on more equal footing would require both of them to change established patterns and assumptions. Tom also insisted on something else. I want us to go to marriage counseling, not because our marriage is broken beyond repair, but because I do not know how to be the kind of partner you need without help. I have operated under wrong assumptions for too long to fix this on my own. Rachel agreed. The following week, they began meeting with a therapist who specialized in marriage dynamics and career-family balance. The sessions were often uncomfortable, forcing both of them to examine their roles, assumptions, and unspoken resentments. 6 months after the Family Feud appearance, a journalist from a major magazine reached out to interview the Morrisons about what had happened since Rachel's revelation. Tom and Rachel agreed, believing their story might help other couples have necessary conversations. The resulting article detailed the changes in their household. Tom had followed through on his promise, stepping back to a less demanding position. Rachel had returned to full-time marketing work, accepting a position at a growing firm that valued her strategic thinking. The household responsibilities were now divided equally, with both Tom and Rachel cooking, cleaning, managing schedules, and attending school events. Their children had adjusted to the changes with mixed reactions. Emma, now in college, had written her application essay about watching her mother claim her voice and what that had taught her about self-advocacy. Lucas had struggled initially with having less access to his parents, but eventually acknowledged that seeing them as equal partners had changed his understanding of what marriage could be. The financial impact had been real. With Tom's reduced salary and the initial expenses of Rachel restarting her career, their household income had temporarily decreased. They had canceled the country club membership, scaled back vacation plans, and made other adjustments. But both Tom and Rachel reported that the financial sacrifice felt worthwhile for the partnership they were building. I have more money in my bank account than I used to, Tom told the journalist. But I have less stress, more connection with my wife and children, and a relationship based on honesty instead of assumptions. That trade-off is worth it. Rachel added, I am using my brain again in ways that fulfill me. I am solving complex problems, creating strategies, contributing ideas that matter beyond our household. I love my children and I am glad I was there for them when they needed me. But I also love this version of myself that exists beyond motherhood. Both can be true. 1 year after the Family Feud appearance, Steve Harvey invited the Morrison family back for a follow-up segment. The update showed a family that looked different in subtle but significant ways. Tom appeared more relaxed, less performatively confident. He spoke about learning to find value and identity beyond his career title. He described the satisfaction of being more present for his children's daily lives and more connected to his wife's experiences. Rachel appeared more energized, more present. She spoke enthusiastically about a marketing campaign she had developed that had significantly increased client revenue. She described the satisfaction of receiving professional recognition for her ideas and abilities. But the most striking change was in how they interacted with each other. There was an ease between them that had been absent during their original appearance. They finished each other's sentences, but also made space for each other's individual thoughts. They referenced what frequently but also maintained clear identities. Steve asked them the same question he had asked a year earlier. What is the secret to making marriage work? This time, their answers were different. Rachel spoke first. Honesty, even when it is uncomfortable. Especially when it is uncomfortable. Silence might preserve peace temporarily, but it destroys partnership eventually. Tom added, and humility. Being willing to admit when you have been wrong, when you have been operating under false assumptions, when you need to change. I spent 15 years thinking I was a good husband because I met certain standards, but I never questioned whether those were the right standards or whether Rachel agreed with them. Steve then asked the question that everyone watching wanted answered. Was it worth it? Was that difficult moment on Family Feud worth the changes it forced? Rachel and Tom looked at each other before Rachel answered. It was the most difficult and most valuable moment of our marriage, because it broke open the silence we had been living in. It forced us to see each other clearly instead of through assumptions, and it gave us the opportunity to build something better. Tom nodded. I would not recommend publicly confronting your spouse on national television as a general strategy, but I am grateful it happened to us, because we were headed toward quiet resentment and eventual disconnection. Rachel's honesty, as shocking as it was in the moment, saved our marriage. The segment showed Rachel at her marketing firm, leading a strategy meeting with confidence and expertise. It showed Tom picking up the children from school and cooking dinner. It showed both parents attending Lucas's soccer game together, genuinely present rather than one parent attending while the other worked. The update resonated differently than the original episode, where the first appearance had sparked debate about women's roles and sacrifice. The follow-up inspired conversations about what real partnership required and what was possible when both people were willing to change. Marriage counselors reported an increase in couples seeking help, not because their marriages were failing, but because they wanted to examine unspoken assumptions before they became destructive patterns. The phrase, "I was not asked," became a recognized signal in therapy sessions, indicating decisions made about one person's life without consulting their actual desires. Companies began examining their workplace cultures and how they inadvertently created dynamics that pushed women into supporting roles rather than leadership positions. Some implemented policies that encouraged more equitable career advancement for both partners in a marriage, including flexible hours and remote work options that did not implicitly favor one parent over another. 2 years after her Family Feud appearance, Rachel was promoted to senior marketing director at her firm. Her career had not just restarted but accelerated, her years of managing complex household logistics translating well into managing complex business operations. Tom, meanwhile, had discovered that stepping back professionally allowed him to develop parts of himself that had been neglected. He started mentoring younger men in his field, teaching them about work-life balance and the importance of equal partnership. He spoke openly about his experience of being confronted by his wife's truth and choosing to change rather than defend his position. Their children had witnessed the complete cycle. They saw the confrontation, the difficult conversations, the changes, and the rebuilding. Emma wrote about it in her college sociology class, analyzing how traditional gender roles had shaped her parents' early marriage and how conscious effort was required to create more equitable partnerships. Lucas, now applying to colleges himself, wrote his application essay about learning that strength meant being willing to change when confronted with hard truths. 3 years after the original appearance, Rachel was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference about career transitions and partnership dynamics. Her speech focused on the cost of silence and the courage required to speak uncomfortable truths. I spent 15 years believing that my silence was strength, that swallowing my resentment was love, that managing everyone's comfort except my own was partnership. She told the audience of 500 women. But silence is not strength, it is erasure, and I finally understood that I could not ask my daughter to value herself if I was not willing to value myself. She continued, speaking my truth on Family Feud was terrifying. I had no idea how Tom would respond. I had no guarantee that honesty would improve our situation, but I knew with certainty that continued silence would destroy me, and in destroying me, it would eventually destroy our family. Rachel's final words to the conference became widely quoted. If you are accommodating everyone except yourself, you are not being a good partner. You are being invisible, and the people who love you cannot love someone they do not see. The kindest thing you can do for your family is to be honest about who you are and what you need. The speech was recorded and shared widely, resonating particularly with women who had made similar sacrifices and maintained similar silences. Tom also began speaking publicly, though his message was directed primarily at men. He became an advocate for men examining their own assumptions about partnership and equality. He spoke at business conferences about how supporting his wife's career had not diminished his own value, but had expanded his understanding of success. I spent 15 years believing that being a good husband meant providing financially and being faithful, he told one audience of business leaders. Those things are necessary but not sufficient. Real partnership means both people's careers, dreams, and contributions matter equally, and that requires men to do more than acknowledge this in theory. It requires us to make material sacrifices in our own careers to make space for our partner's ambitions. The Morrison family story became a case study in marriage and family courses at universities. Sociology professors analyzed the dynamics that led to Rachel's long silence and the factors that finally prompted her to speak. Psychology professors examined the process of rebuilding a relationship after fundamental assumptions had been challenged. Communication professors studied the power of public truth, telling and its impact on private relationships. 5 years after the Family Feud appearance, a documentary filmmaker approached Tom and Rachel about creating a longer exploration of their story and its broader implications. The resulting documentary, titled "The Question I Was Never Asked," featured the Morrisons but also included interviews with dozens of other couples who had grappled with similar dynamics. The documentary revealed that the Morrisons' experience was far from unique. Countless marriages operated under unexamined assumptions about whose career took priority, whose dreams were practical versus optional, and whose daily contributions were valued versus expected. But the documentary also showed examples of couples who had successfully built more equitable partnerships. It highlighted men who had stepped back professionally to support their wives' careers, women who had spoken difficult truths and rebuilt their marriages on more honest foundations, and children who had benefited from seeing both parents as full people with careers and identities beyond parenthood. In the documentary's conclusion, Steve Harvey reflected on the moment that had started everything. When Rachel answered my question that day on Family Feud, she did not give me the answer her husband expected. She gave the truth, and that truth changed not just her family but thousands of families who watched and recognized themselves in her story. He continued, "The most powerful thing about that moment was not the confrontation itself, but what came after." Tom could have become defensive, dismissed Rachel's concerns, or insisted that she was being unfair. But he chose to listen. He chose to believe her experience even when it contradicted his assumptions. And he chose to change. Steve's final observation became the documentary's lasting message. Real love is not about never having hard conversations. It is about having the courage to speak truth and the humility to hear it. The Morrisons showed us that sometimes the most important answer is the one that nobody expected. As this remarkable story reaches its conclusion, it is important to note the lasting impact of one moment of truth spoken on a game show stage. Tom and Rachel Morrison continue to work on their partnership, recognizing that building equality in a marriage is an ongoing process rather than a single decision. Their children have both pursued careers with a clear understanding that partnership requires both people's dreams to matter. Emma is now working in healthcare administration while her partner manages their household. Lucas is studying business with plans to enter a field that offers flexibility for future family responsibilities. Rachel continues to advance in her marketing career, now serving as Chief Strategy Officer for a mid-sized firm. Tom has found satisfaction in his senior director role and the increased presence it allows in his family's daily life. They regularly speak together about partnership dynamics, using their experience to help other couples examine their own assumptions before those assumptions become destructive. The phrase, "husband didn't expect Tad answer," has become shorthand for moments when unspoken truths in relationships finally demand to be acknowledged. It represents the power of honesty to disrupt comfortable narratives and create the possibility for something more authentic and equitable. Rachel often reflects that her moment on Family Feud was both the most terrifying and most liberating experience of her life. "I thought I was risking everything by speaking my truth," she says. "But I was actually risking everything by staying silent. The real danger was not in confronting Tom, but in continuing to erase myself for the sake of everyone's comfort." Tom acknowledges that being confronted publicly was humiliating initially but ultimately necessary. "I was not going to see the truth if Rachel whispered it. I needed to be shocked into awareness. And I will always be grateful that she cared enough about our marriage to force that awakening, even when it would have been easier to stay silent." The Morrison family's story reminds us that the strongest relationships are not built on avoiding difficult conversations, but on having the courage to speak uncomfortable truths, and the commitment to rebuild on a foundation of honesty and equality. Sometimes the answer nobody expects is exactly the answer everyone needs to hear. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that speaking their truth, even when difficult, can transform relationships in profound ways. Because sometimes the husband does not expect that answer, but it is the answer that changes everything.